All right, all right. Good afternoon. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I believe it's time to begin. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome you to this session. This has been a dynamic day already for those who tuned in to hear Dr. Mitzi Smith. I know that your minds were blown. My mind is still spinning. I wanted to post stuff, but I felt convicted about posting because I didn't have the understanding to truly defend my post once I post the statements that she made. So I deleted the post I made, but at the same time, I'm now reflecting on them and they're going to mess with me the rest of the day. They're going to mess with me the rest of the day because I knew like God is not synonymous with the Bible. I knew that would have caused a whole uproar, or um, um, this whole idea of using this strong black woman as a means of not allowing or appreciating or leading to relief and self-care. That was just amazing. So I couldn't post those things because then I would have had a conflicting conversation the rest of the day trying to defend statements that I still have to reprocess. So we're here for the next couple of minutes to discuss this topic: preventing a post-pandemic playground for predators, the church's duality of care as a loving congregation. Let me just give you a little background. This came as a result of thinking of a topic for this conference that did not involve things like new platforms or new ways to disciple or new ways to digitally engage and evangelize. What I thought about as a result of my doctoral research was this other side of this post-pandemic promised land of virtual classrooms or virtual engagement in ministry. What I thought about was the fact that when I have friends who are watching Facebook lives, they spend a lot of time watching the comment section. One perfect example of that is when you watch Kobe Mitchell's sermons at night. The comment gallery is the place that most people spend their time. I also realized that in watching the comment gallery, especially when there are preachers that have high propensities for um, personal, not scandal, but personal confusion, that you watch how people come in and make comments and even potentially um, um, engage with more of the persons in the chat than in the actual message of the moment. So I then thought about this idea of how is the church safeguarding from the takeover of their feeds to be used in negative ways. So before I get into it, really, because I'm a father, right? I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. In fact, I just had a grandson on yesterday. Um, I am a husband. I'm a sibling. I'm a pastor more than anything. Well, not more than those things, but more professionally related. I have to care for my sheep. And so now, as a shepherd of a congregation that may not be in the physical building, I can't just look at a person and see their ill intent. I now have platforms that are exposed to people from all over who can easily slide in and cause harm to the sheep that I'm caring for. So, just a couple of questions to get us started. Just take about 5 minutes, 3 minutes, and just think about these questions and just we'll go over them. Just take about 3 minutes, 3 minutes, and just self-reflect. I know it says 5 minutes, but we only have limited time. You have about 2 more minutes. One more minute. So the first question is, do you watch live stream services with the comments on? Like, do you ever watch them with the comments on, or do you scroll to the left on your phone and just want to watch the service, not worry about who's making comments? Right. Here's the second question. Have you ever noticed conversation streams unrelated to the broadcasted message? Have you ever watched how people engage the members, especially when a controversial statement is made? So, you're seeing a preaching and someone comes on and says something like, there is no God. And all of a sudden, the direction of the people who are watching goes to this person and is now left, the attention is left from the presenter and now focused on the person. Here's the third question. Has anyone ever slid in your DM after seeing you on a live stream feed? Now, this is very honest. I mean, be honest. Because most times we post our pretty picture up, right? And people watch, and then they can scroll over our name, see our profile. So has anybody ever slid in our DM? Number 4, when watching a random church's stream, would you know who to contact if you were ever made to feel uncomfortable? Who would you contact, or would you just disengage and never come back if someone during the service engaged you inappropriately? And then here's the 5th question. In reflecting over the multiple services you have watched, could you see how this new worship medium, let me show you the rest of the question, could be a predator's playground? No one's tracking it. Most times we don't go back and look at the comments until after, or we read the transcript. So there is a potential that people could be engaging inappropriately the whole time and we not know it. In fact, if I was to show you some of the latest trends in sexting words and language, you might think they're speaking in tongues, when the reality is they're asking pointed questions. They're asking pointed questions and they're expecting pointed responses. That's good when there's no real-time moderator. We're going to get to that in just a second. All right. So let me give you some spiritual backing. Now, I prayed all of Dr. Smith's presentation that she was not going to address any of these scriptures because I was not ready. But throughout the Bible, and I just focused on Genesis, there is evidence of those inappropriate moments in the Bible that lead to things, or could potentially lead to things that we consider highly explicit sexual activity in the church, right? So you have Lot's encounter, where Lot begs the people to choose his 2 daughters who have not known a man. You can have your way with them. Just don't do anything to these men because they're our guests. That is probably the first instance of human trafficking or potential human trafficking. Then you have Dinah, right? Dinah is Leah's daughter, and Dinah is raped by a person of influence. She's just coming to hang out with her girlfriends. And while she's there, someone sees her. She catches the eye of a man who has influence, who has privilege. And as a result, he rapes her, then falls in love with her. Privilege. Third one is Tamar. Tamar catfishes Judah because of her hurt, because of the way he dealt with her and her need for a husband. She catfishes Judah and presents herself with a veil, a false sense of her face, and ends up engaging in sexual activity with him. And then finally, Joseph in Potiphar's house, where Potiphar's wife makes a pass at him. And even though he resists, he's thrown in jail because of false allegations, right? So this has been happening for a while. So what are we really talking about today? Today, we're talking about human trafficking, we're talking about sex trafficking, and we're talking about sexual predators that can all be seen and experienced potentially in this new post-pandemic platform of social media enhanced or meeting place media methods of engaging in our congregations, right? So let's go to work. How did this come about? Well, first of all, there was an increase in opportunity. Nona Jones, who is the Facebook guru of faith-based media, says that on March 15th, which was the last Sunday many people gathered, if they gathered that Sunday, there were only 11,000 online churches or virtually present churches. 11,000. 1 month later, maybe 45 days later, there were over 85,000 online platforms. And most of these online platforms have not set up communities within them. They're just spaces for the churches to broadcast their presentations publicly. So mind you, you have an increase of 800% in a 45-day period, which suggests that now there is more access of those who find interest in engaging virtually as a predator platform, right? They're no longer trying to engage you in the parking lot because we're not attending church. They're no longer trying to slide messages or meet you in the supermarket because we're not publicly going out. So now their biggest place is the Facebook platform. So there's an increased opportunity. 800% more churches are, and that's probably even increased since then, are now engaging in platforms. Fairfax County Schools, and this is the public school that serves 189,000 students. When they first went virtual, they had a bad problem with Zoom bombers who would come on, post illicit sexual material, racial images, and they would post in the chat racially charged comments. 189,000 students impacted to the point where they shut down virtual learning for a period of time. Again, it's not by happenstance. Here's the next thing. So not only is there increased opportunity, here's the next thing. The church prioritized presence over preparation. Look at what it's saying. So because they wanted to get on it, they had to get out. They had to get their presence out there. What a great chance to get their message global. They didn't do the preparation. So as it was mentioned earlier, no one took the time to put monitors in place to monitor the messages. They just had to get on Facebook Live. So they had to make their presence known, but because they didn't prepare, they have made themselves available for this negative presence of predators, right? Because they had to be out there. There was pressure, right? Because the church members, and they were so worried. Oh man, Dr. Smith messed us up with this about giving. They were so worried about what would happen with the tithe, what was going to happen to the giving. But hey, the building's closed. So if anything, your light bill should go down, your water bill should go down. But we want to make sure we're getting this money. So we push ourselves out there. And because we're ill prepared, we now open ourselves and make ourselves available. Hold on, because I have to push it just a little bit more. We chose comparison over context. Every ministry did not need to be on Facebook Live. Every ministry did not need to have their stuff publicly out there, right? The reality is most ministries could have safeguarded themselves by doing things like a conference call line. Because here's the thing, if you're in a rural community and your services are maintained or the majority of your members are 65 and older, When you push your stuff on Facebook Live and only 2 of your 17 members have Facebook, who are you really trying to reach? And how are you caring for those who are under your charge? So you push yourself out there because you see other people doing it. And remember, that was the big debate. People were criticizing other people for how they were handling this pandemic and their preaching during this pandemic. And the pressure was on pastors to perform, not to care for the sheep they were entrusted with, but to perform. So as a result, many of them put themselves out there just trying, not without a plan, and they really missed the opportunity to care for their sheep. I didn't understand that until I was interviewing for a church, and I was wondering why. In the interview, it was on Zoom. It was me, the opportunity for me to do Bible study for this church on a Zoom platform, and I was wondering why they made sure that they took the time to identify everyone on. And can I tell you why? Because they didn't want random people on there who could have taken over or tried to interrupt the flow of that moment. How many of us have been that integrous to those we care for that we pause to acknowledge who? Just take time to welcome them and ask them to give their real name. So if they're calling in, it's not just a number, or if they've named themselves, it's not Boo Boo or Joe Blow. It's actually a name that can be identified. Why? Because the care of our sheep is so important that we can't risk harming them by allowing anyone in. Now, that doesn't mean we don't love them. That just means that we show them our love by engaging them individually and purposefully for the purpose of welcoming them. Because here's the thing, you don't invite nobody over to your mama's house and don't allow them to introduce themselves to your mom. You don't do that, right? You don't. So when you invite people to your mother's house, the first thing they must do, do you remember? Okay. Do you remember that Good Times episode when Mad Dog came over and he tried to introduce himself to Florida and James with the word Mad Dog, and they had to correct him? I don't want your street name. I need to know who you are. So you got to tell me what your name is. Okay. Here's the next thing. Sadly, many in worship leadership don't even consider the probability of predators. Yes, I didn't catch it. Yet they buy into the stereotype. Ooh, man, you messing with me. I wanted to show this video, but because of the platform, I can't. But I did an interview with Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant, and he was talking about how he came to Atlanta, and I can share it. You can inbox me later, and I can send you the link. And how he came to Atlanta hoping to attack and prevent sex traffickers and human trafficking, because the biggest day of human trafficking is the Super Bowl. And he said that he wanted to drive around the corners, but he said they don't do trafficking on the corners anymore. They do it on the internet. Then he said he wanted to buy up the sleazy motels. He says, no, that business owners are the main people buying them, and they buy out hotels months in advance. He said then he wanted to go to the strip club, but in Atlanta, strip clubs are public businesses, and as a non-patron on strip club property, he could be arrested. And then the advocates came to him and said, sir, you're going after the symptom, but you're not going after the root. You're going after the women who need this money to survive, but you're not going after the men, even some of the men in your church who are the patrons and the Johns. He says, because the biggest demographic in Atlanta, you got to know your demographic, your context. The biggest demographic in Atlanta are men 30 to 50, right? So again, you're so busy comparing yourself to what other people are doing, you're not taking the time to really assess what you have and what you need. But because somebody else is doing it or somebody else recommended it, you're trying it when it doesn't meet your conclave. Your context. Yes, conclaves and conferences are huge. Listen, well, I don't want to share too much, but conferences and conclaves, and there's another C, conventions, that you don't think about. And when I talk conventions, I'm not talking about football, and I'm not talking about fraternity. I'm talking about even in the church, there are conventions where trafficking takes place. Okay. All right. That's just truth. That's truth. That's truth. All right. So we chose, and here's the other thing. This is probably the realest comment of this whole diagnostic. We never knew that this would be our new normal. Like I'm a chaplain in the National Guard, and I have soldiers that came on orders on March 16th. On March 16th, they were told to bring enough clothes for 3 days. They would come on orders and just be sent back home. Today is July 24th, and these soldiers are still on orders. Why? Because nobody knows how long this is going to be. So the reality is making this important is important and a necessity, because this is now our new normal. Every congregation is going to have those in person, those who can't come back because of high risk of health, and they're going to have those that find it convenient to be home watching. And so now we have to engage them purposefully, because they have become our new congregation. This is where some of this stuff comes from. You know, we never thought this was going to be possible. In fact, to be honest, if you be honest about the churches you attend, they demonized online. Many churches demonize Facebook. In fact, I've been in some churches where they banned people from having their cell phones and broadcasting the service Facebook Live. I had some who spent so little money in their streaming technology that you couldn't even tell who was preaching on the stage. But now it is necessary for the survival of not only the ministry, but of the proclamation of the word, because large gatherings are not working. I've had 5 of my friends who pastor in Florida that reopened and now are shutting their doors again because the numbers are steadily increasing. And I love your engagement. Please put your questions in the comments, please. So how bad is it really? How bad is human trafficking really? Now, what I'm about to show you are statistics from 2017. And to be honest, they're really null and void now, because the game changed on March 15th. Or really March 13th. March 13th was the last day I taught as a 5th grade teacher in the building. I haven't been back to my school since March 13th. All right. So let's see. How bad is it really? This is an infographic made for the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority. All right. So over 50% of human trafficking, the victims are children. Look at this now. Catch this. Traffickers target victims on the telephone, on the internet, through friends, at the mall, and after school programs. Well, guess what? We're not hanging out with our friends because we've been self-quarantined and socially distant. We don't go to the malls. We're not in after school programs because schools are closed. Most children don't talk on their phone. They may text. So the majority of engagement now, it may have been 20% prior to, but now it's probably 85% of all engagement takes place on social media. Can I tell you why? And this is even beyond just virtual church, but because every childhood app now has a text capacity. In other words, for every app a child has, they now have the ability to create a profile. That profile allows them to put information in that children will put in: their phone number because they're proud to have a cell phone, their email address because they're proud to have it, any of their social media handles, and then it allows them to engage with other people via chat. Now, let me tell you why that's dangerous. Because anybody can situate or present themselves at any age and engage. My daughter is a TikTok star. I mean, she doesn't have the blue certified thing around her name, but I looked in her phone when I was checking her phone to see why her grades were so bad, and she had 575 TikTok videos recorded. So I asked her, has anybody ever tried to comment or come at you sideways on Facebook? And she said yes. She said, I got weird texts. I didn't understand what they meant, but I didn't tell anybody. So here's the question. If your children are being engaged and they're ashamed to talk to you about it, or they don't understand it, so they think it's a mistake, yet there are people that are preying on them, how long before they actually respond to a text, because that's all it takes. All it takes is a response to a text, the blushing because of a comment, and a like to a statement, or the answering of a messenger FaceTime call or a direct engagement. That's all it takes. Okay, here's the second slide. So this is in 2017. The National Human Trafficking Hotline received 13,897 calls. 4,460 of them were new human trafficking cases. Human trafficking has been reported in all 50 states. So there's not a state, and even in District of Columbia. In fact, it is more prevalent now. And even in social media, it becomes dangerous, because this engagement can lead to the personal revelation of information, or the personal revealing of information. And because the danger of this opening back up is that people are gathering, they're so excited to gather. Now children are sharing information about their location, which is now allowing the people that connected to them while in self-quarantine to now engage with them publicly in a place where there's a mass of people, and they can easily be touched, tried, or taken. Okay. All right. So look at how they're engaging. And these are typical DM responses, right? So pimps use these. They show romantic interest. That's 51%. And again, it's not just children. So there are some adults that are going through this because they know how to target. So, okay. I like this. As somebody who has a history of manipulation, or have friends that are manipulators, there are signs that a predator can see when observing your profile that gives them inclination to come after you or to approach you. There are statements that can be made in your praise in the virtual platform that allows them to pray by suggesting they want to pray. So they suggest they want to pray when they're actually praying on you. Okay. Here's the next thing. They offer financial support. They give false job offerings. And then they abduct victims. Now, 2017, the internet was the #1 platform. Now, I would even suggest that at some point I said they saw 14%. But now, like I said, it's 85%, and 4 of the 5 victims are female. That also means that 1 in 5 are male. So don't think that it's just females that are being trafficked. It's also males. This is just good information. I think I have one more slide. All right. So women are trafficked. Look, strip clubs, peep and touch shows, massage parlors that offer sexual services. You know, those are happy endings, and prostitution. Dr. Smith just talked about a massage is not enough anymore. But here's the crazy thing. It happens so prevalently because they make money so fast, but they're not making money for themselves. Last 2 weeks ago, Showtime premiered this show called P-Valley. And P-Valley is Players Club on steroids. For those that watch the old Players Club with Bernie Mac and Diamond and Jamie Foxx. So now P-Valley is a public show about this idea of strip clubs and trafficking. And the fact that many women find themselves in strip clubs because they're escaping some traumatic event that happened in the real world. But isn't that what the church is too? Not a strip club, but a church is a place that people run to for escape. But in running to it for escape, they often bring some of the stuff that they were in the world into it. And that's a welcome place. So I'm not judging. What I'm saying is the church must be prepared to receive. The duality is we got to protect our sheep, but we're also a place where those who are hurting, those sheep that come wounded, should be able to be healed. So what do we do now? What do we do now? I mean, how do we treat those who are hurting? How do we treat those who are damaged and who are wounded? How do we treat them when they possibly could be preying on our sheep? How do we do this? I mean, how do we have both the shepherd rod and the staff and use them simultaneously to not only protect our sheep and to ward off the evil, but also to help those who are deemed evil, but who are wrestling with flesh issues that only an encounter with the Holy Spirit can heal, along with treatment? How do we do both at the same time? Well, I would like to suggest that there has to be some rethinking that takes place. That there has to be some rethinking. That's why this is so, because we haven't addressed it. The reality is, in this cyberspace, let me tell you what I thought about. I thought about the fact that most churches are experiencing greater numbers of viewers. Most churches are also encouraging engagement online. They're doing fellowshipping online. They're encountering people online. And even when they set up private groups and private communities opportunities, the questions are easy and they give too many people moderator status who are just accepting everybody into these private fellowship groups. And it still gives access because they look churchy in their profile picture, right? Because they set a scripture in the dialogue box publicly. We don't see what they've done in the inbox privately. So as a result, we now have this playground where predators of all types can engage. The reality is these predators are not just those that are listed as with criminal offenses. So some of these are just people who find peculiarity and who find their pleasure engaging in online platforms. All right. So let me tell you what I mean. I did some doctoral research on pastors that are dealing with unauthorized activity, unauthorized sexual activity, intimate activity. And what I found was that 4 to 8% of the pastors that I surveyed saw things like strip clubs, pornography, and sexting, those three areas, as not wrong and not worth stopping. Watch this now. So 4 to 8% of these pastors said that pornography, that sexting, and that pornography, sexting, and strip clubs were neither wrong nor worth stopping. So that's 4 to 8 of the population I surveyed. Just think how those are pastors. Just think how that may translate to the general populace. If there are 8 billion people and 4 to 8% of them do not see anything wrong with strip clubs, pornography, and sexting, yet strip clubs, for the most part, are not being active. And the only platforms they have are virtual platforms which allow for both sexting and pornography. Then how do you think the increase of this is going to take place in the platforms we now serve? So it's time to rethink. And just a couple areas I want to look at before I entertain questions. First of all, we have to remember our responsibility. We're shepherds. As shepherds, pastors are, And the church, as shepherd of the flock, we are responsible for the care of our sheep. Now, that means all sheep, not just the positive tithe giving sheep, but the sheep that come battered and tattered. We should be a place of refuge, acceptance, affirmation, and recovery. That should be what we do, which means we cannot dictate the sheep we receive. There's a story of a shepherd who had a well-maintained flock that was being watered at a watering hole with dirty sheep. And the dirty sheep began to engage the well-looking flock in conversation about why your flock looks so good. Why do you look to be so well groomed? Why are you so heavy? Why do you look to have that weight on you? And the sheep replied, because our shepherd takes care of us. Our shepherd makes sure we're groomed. Our shepherd talks to us, protects us, feeds us. And when the shepherd raised his hand for the sheep to return, he saw that not only the clean, healthy looking sheep were coming toward him, but also the wounded, dirty, skinny looking sheep. Here's the testimony that the reality is when you project an image that seems to be welcoming to the public, then you cannot control who comes. But you also must remember that as shepherd, you're also caretaker and nurturer, which means you got to care for those who are, but you have to nurture those who are new and invite them and assimilate them in. But in that assimilation, you have to be able, oh, I'm coming to that. Oh man, you on it, right? You have to be able to talk to them as well as build relationship with them and then provide support for them. That's my next slide. But here's the last thing in this one. Our responsibility as the church is mandated reporter, which means we have a legal and ethical responsibility to address the things we see as we're viewing and engaging in the congregation. We have a responsibility when we see abuse in these Zoom children's classrooms, when we're doing children's church and we're doing a family worship Bible study. We have the responsibility to report the stuff we see. Can I tell you why? Because what we've learned in this season of socially distanced and stay at home, that many times the abuser is trapped in the house with the abused. And eventually they're going to get on each other's nerves. And the only interaction they have is with the virtual classroom and with the virtual church. And so we must be aware of what we see and able to address it and provide help. Yeah. Which means, and that goes to my next slide, they're not keeping up with the policies, which also means that we have to do the training. So here's the second thing. Remember our responsibility, but we also need to rethink our requirements. Now, when I talk about rethinking our requirements, it's going to cause reallocation at some point. But Brother Willie, to your comment, background checks for everyone is going to be a requirement, especially for those who are engaging directly with our people. Right now, talk about what applications or software. There are several, but I would encourage you to look at who your insurance policy, your church's insurance policy recommends, because oftentimes they already have partnership, like Northwest Mutual or Brothers Mutual already have partnerships with background check software. Now they'll say recommend for volunteers, but in this day and age, everybody now becomes a volunteer because everybody now has access, and you have to be able to do it. I would also say this is the season to push things like policy for these social media platforms to vet the membership of those who are creating accounts in this season. Let me tell you why that's important. Because what you're finding, if you do the research, is several people have accounts that are only 2 days old. I serve as the dean of seminary on Sundays, which is a It is a course for continuous improvement and continuous education for those who are preachers. And I had a guy that wanted to request membership in the group, and this is what red flagged me. His name was masculine, but the name that he created the account under was something like Luscious Lollipop, and it was created a day ago. I couldn't accept him as a member of the group, as the moderator, because that looked like a setup for failure. But if these platforms that we frequent would beef up their security. Now, I have to admit that Zoom has now, in their 5.0, has now increased their security, and they now have encrypted options. Especially, listen to me, if you are doing anything with children, you need to have encrypted options. You need to have options that are encrypted and that are policed by these companies, right? Then you need to do training. You need to make sure that you're doing training for everybody that's involved, which means some of your Sunday schools and Sunday services need to be transformed into classrooms where we can have whole group instruction, because that's your captive audience, on current trends for sexual trafficking, current trends for those who are trafficked, and current trends for the language that you may see in the chats. Here's the fourth thing. You need to have a standard operating procedure for all virtual gatherings. This is the season, since so much stuff is virtual, we now need to have these standard operating procedures. No more happenstance, not just anybody going on live, but there needs to be a standard person who goes live. And if you share, there needs to be a standard thing you share. There needs to be standard comments that are posted in your chats, in your lives. You need to have standard pinned comments. This is a safe place. If you feel you're being violated, contact this number. Here's the number of the moderator. You need to set your settings so that only the moderator can comment. These are setting things. That only the moderator can comment and no one can comment on anybody else's post. These are setting things. In your Zoom, you can turn off the chat, or you can direct the chat that all the chat comes to private comments that you can then filter out before you send them out. These things, the post non-friends of no or friends of friends can't post without it being approved by the moderator. These are all setting things that we must put in place for the protection of our sheep. Here's the next thing. I'm almost done because I need questions. I got time for questions. I don't even know what time this is over. I think I'm done. Restructure our roles, right? Here's the next thing that we have to think about. Your church must now be realigned for virtual ministry, which means you're not going to need ushers because there ain't nobody coming in the doors, but you are going to need virtual ushers, those who can monitor the stream. You need virtual greeters whose whole responsibility is to greet people as they come in. You need virtual ushers who, in those systems where you can add people, like you have waiting rooms, who can vet the people before they're added or escort people out. Usher's role is also to help mute the conversations. You're going to need virtual intercessors who are going to be picking up and inboxing and praying for those who address traumatic moments in the service or who talk about prayer. I was watching the Bishop's Kickback, Bishop Rudolph McKissick, the other day, and a lady expressed the desire for suicide. And within 20 seconds, an intercessor was contacted. Within 5 minutes, she was on the phone with that intercessor, and she restored her relationship to Christ before the end of the broadcast, right? So these things are necessary. And then support structures. So, and that's going to go to my next slide, because you need to have trauma-informed support leaders who can help with those who are traumatized because of these platforms, and also who can engage those who have flesh issues that have never been addressed and have been allowed prior to now to just run rampant. So you have to address the manipulator. Listen, you may even have to sit a deacon down or a trustee down or a minister down who has a peculiarity for pedophilia, or for engaging inappropriately or saying things out the side of their neck inappropriately, you may have to address it, because here's the thing, this is public record now. And what used to be covered up in the church can no longer be covered on a national platform, because it will be shared. And in this screenshot season, it can easily be posted and ministries be not only litigated, but also destroyed. And here's the last thing, and I'm done. Reinvest in the right things. Talking about allocation of funds and what justifies this need for giving, why you need budgets when the buildings are closed. Well, you need to be able to pay for these encrypted and secure meeting platforms. Zoom, GoToMeeting, in fact, Zoom and GoToMeeting, and even free conference call now have encrypted software for visual. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. I got to pause. I got to read a comment. And don't let the insurance company tell you, oh, just put anything in your statement concerning your youth protective standards. Several insurance companies only want you to have something. They often don't look deeply into them. So the worship leadership must have the legal counsel to ensure their policies coincide with the current recommendations from the youth protection organizations like National Child Abuse Coalition, Zero Abuse Project, etc. In fact, I would even push it. Thank you for that. I mentioned, and I repent for mentioning the insurance company's background check recommendations. I would say go to the agencies that specialize in it to get their recommendations for who they would use, and spend the money for it, right? Spend the money for mental health counselors and therapists to lead these support groups. Don't just have those who are untrained in pastoral care, or who are only trained in pastoral care, leading the traumatic counseling that is necessary. Don't just have any lottie-dottie and everybody. No, pay for the therapist. Let me say, I have a small church. Well, churches can collaborate and pay the salary for one mental health professional, who then splits their time between the churches. Partner and collaborate. This is the season. Do it now so you don't have to pay for it later. Training platforms, pay for people to get trained to be platforming. Don't just because they operate your camera in the church and they have a Facebook page, don't mean they're qualified to manage platforms on this size scale. Train everybody so that they know what to do, know what to look for, and then finally pay for intense therapy for those who are traumatized or causing the trauma. Partnership. I'm done because I'm over and everybody's in a networking session but us. I talked too long. So are there any questions? I'm sorry for taking so long. Here's my contact information. We can talk offline about some of this stuff, but the reality is there has to be these upgrades. I hope I answered your question. Specific apps, you have to do what works best for you. What one ministry uses that they spend a lot of money for when they have a budget of $2 million may not be the same if you have a budget of $100. You may have to figure out what works. A lot of these platforms that we're using that have free opportunity now, we need to now invest for the paid subscription, because with the paid prescription comes security provided incentives that don't come for the free. So that 40-minute free you had was good, but it may not be good enough in this new season as we're really trying to protect our sheep. All right. It is networking time, and it's time for the next session, I believe. So please, thank you for joining. Thank you for participating. I pray this blessed you. And I want to encourage you to take these things seriously. The care of our sheep should always be our primary responsibility and role. You be blessed. To God be the glory. I thank you. I still have time for comments because I don't think anybody took me off yet. So, I mean, I know you want to network. I was kind of nervous about the networking thing, about pressing a button, but I had to get over that. But oh, my contact info. Here we go. It's coming back on the screen again. Right here. Right there. NapoleonABradford.com is the website. NapoleonABradford@gmail.com. All social media at Napoleon Abram. And my number is 202-599-6001. I guess the essentialness of this is simply this. What happens, man? What happens, woman? What happens, pastor, brother, sister, cousin, if one of your members gets snatched up and they connect it back to a conversation that was started at your church's worship service? Now, at one time, we had to worry about those wandering in off the streets, especially for our churches who are in the hood, or our churches that are in weird communities, random people coming up and engaging. We know we used to have our monitors walk around the church to make sure nobody strange was coming around, but now we're cyber. And so the danger now is they have unlimited access, and we can't be the one to let it fall and let them slip through the cracks. Yes. Yes. Can I tell you how I know this? And this is probably off the record and it's not justified, but this is what I believe in my spirit. I believe in my spirit that the reason the COVID cases are always linked back to church is because regardless of where else the person may have been, they know they can hold the church liable, and they will sue. And that's why I believe when people are, because the constant thing, these people can go all over and be present and spread it, but they always track it back for most reasons back to being at a church. So I believe that is a demonic attack as a way of increasing litigation against the church. But that's just me, and that's off the record. It's off the record. Please don't hold me. I don't want to end up on the Today Show because of a comment I made. You know what? It's the truth, though. So I'm not worried about it. Listen, I have loved talking to you. The new sessions are starting. Love y'all. Talk to y'all later. Get to your next.